sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. You're here because you're interested in the tension brewing between the FBI, the Trump administration, and the January 6th investigations.
Lots to unpack there.
Yeah, it is. And our main source is a CBS News article from February 4th, 2025. So let's get right into it. The first thing that really jumped out at me is this whole situation with FBI agents suing the Justice Department.
Oh, wow. Okay. So not just a few disgruntled employees we're talking.
It's not just a couple of individuals, no. The article mentions two separate groups of agents plus their association are all filing lawsuits against the DOJ.
Multiple lawsuits against their own department. That's pretty wild. What's driving this?
Well, it seems like the root of it is this demand from the Justice Department. They want a list of all the agents who worked on not only the January 6th investigations, but also any probes related to former President Trump.
That's a lot to ask for. I mean, how many agents are we even talking about here?
It's a big number.
Yeah.
The article says over 5,000.
5,000. Wow, that really puts the scope of these investigations into perspective.
Definitely. And the article talks about how the agents are worried this list could be used against them.
Like a hit list.
Yeah, they're concerned it'll be used for retaliation, like firings or other actions. You know, given the political climate and some of Trump's past comments about law enforcement, it's not hard to see why they might be on edge.
Yeah, I can see that. It's
Yeah.
definitely a valid concern.
For sure. And to make matters worse, the article doesn't actually say what's going to happen to the people on this list. It just mentions that some senior officials have already been pushed out.
Oh, so that adds even more uncertainty for the rank and file agents who are still there.
Right. It's this huge cloud hanging over them.
Absolutely.
And all of this is happening with Trump's campaign promise to clean house at the DOJ still ringing in everyone's ear.
Yeah, I remember that. He made it very clear he wasn't happy with the status quo there.
Right. So how do we interpret all of these personnel moves? Is it really about accountability, or is there something more partisan going on here?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. It's impossible to ignore the broader context here. The article mentions there's a long history of tension between Trump and certain law enforcement agencies, especially the FBI.
So this isn't just about January 6th. It's part of a larger pattern.
Exactly. And that's something really important for listeners to keep in mind as we follow this story. There's a quote from an FBI assistant director in New York that really struck me. He called this situation a battle for the soul of the FBI.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. What do you make of that?
Well, to me, it speaks to the deep divisions that exist within the Bureau right now. I mean, agents suing their own department. That's a clear sign that something is seriously wrong.
And how common is this kind of internal strife?
It's highly unusual. To see this level of discord is pretty alarming. It has the potential to be very damaging to the FBI's reputation and effectiveness.
So how can they even function properly with all this going on?
Yeah, that's a good question. On top of everything else, you've got the acting FBI director releasing this super generic, upbeat video message.
And completely ignoring the elephant in the room.
Exactly. It's almost like he's trying to pretend everything's fine.
Which it clearly isn't.
Yeah. Some might see that as a lack of leadership in a moment of crisis.
It definitely raises questions about the direction of the FBI at such a critical time.
No doubt about that. And it'll be interesting to see how this whole leadership situation plays out as these lawsuits move forward.
Yeah, and how it all impacts morale within the FBI. This seems like it could have some serious long-term consequences.
I think that's a safe bet. These lawsuits could drag on for years, and the outcome could have a significant impact on how future administrations interact with law enforcement agencies.
So the ramifications of this could extend far beyond just this particular case.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This situation really highlights the delicate balance of power in our system of government and the importance of upholding the rule of law.
Well, this deep dive is definitely shaping up to be a thought-provoking one, that's for sure. So where do we go from here? What are the potential consequences of all of this? And what does it mean for all of us who are following this story?
All good questions. And those are exactly the things we're going to delve into next. This whole situation really brings up the potential for politicization of law enforcement.
That's a pretty scary thought. Can you unpack that a little? What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, when a president openly criticizes and tries to control those agencies that should be operating independently, it really undermines the rule of law. It erodes public trust.
So this is bigger than just Trump then. You're saying it's a potential trend.
Exactly. What happens in this case with these lawsuits could set a precedent for how future administrations deal with law enforcement. If those agents, if they feel like they could be targeted just for doing their jobs, investigating those in power, it's going to have a chilling effect on future investigations.
That's a frightening thought. What happens to accountability then if nobody's willing to investigate the powerful because they're too afraid of the fallout?
Yeah, it's a dangerous road to go down. And we need to be really cautious. This whole thing just underscores how delicate our democratic institutions are. You know how important those checks and balances are?
You keep mentioning checks and balances. Could you remind us what you mean by that?
Sure. So checks and balances. Those are the mechanisms in our government that are supposed to prevent any one branch from becoming too powerful. Right. So in this case, we're talking about the Justice Department, which is part of the executive branch, headed by the president.
Sure.
The FBI, while it is part of the executive branch, it's meant to be independent. They investigate wrongdoing wherever they find it, even if it leads to the Oval Office.
So the worry is that if the executive branch exerts too much control over the FBI, it throws off that balance of power.
Exactly. And that's why this story is so important. It's not just about some political drama. This is about the very structure of our government.
This all sounds very serious, but for the average person out there, what does it actually mean? Like, what are the real-world consequences of having law enforcement agencies that are essentially politicized?
Well, for one thing, it could mean that those in power are less likely to be held accountable.
Right.
It could also lead to a decrease in public trust in law enforcement, which would make their jobs a lot harder. And as we've already discussed, it could really discourage those whistleblowers. It could make people think twice before pursuing those sensitive cases.
So this isn't some abstract concept. It has real-world impacts.
Absolutely. It's about fairness, accountability, the integrity of our institutions, things that affect us all.
And what about the FBI itself? I mean, where does the Bureau go from here? Can it really recover from this much internal strife and outside pressure?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's going to take a lot of time and effort to rebuild that trust, both within the FBI and between the Bureau and the public.
So what needs to happen? What steps can be taken to start restoring that trust?
Well, first and foremost, I think the next FBI director, whoever they may be, needs to really make unity and transparency a top priority. They need to send a clear message that the FBI is committed to upholding the law no matter what, without fear or favor.
It's interesting. The FBI's motto is fidelity, bravery, integrity. But it feels like right now, all three of those things are being put to the test.
Yeah, you could definitely say that.
Yeah.
And how this whole battle plays out is going to have a huge impact on the future of the FBI and honestly on the country as a whole.
So where do things go from here? The article mentioned that these lawsuits could drag on for years. What should we be looking out for as this story continues to develop?
Yeah, this is really just the beginning of a very long and complex legal battle. The courts are going to have to wrestle with some really fundamental questions about executive power, the rights of federal employees, and how to balance national security with individual liberty.
Doesn't sound like there are any easy answers here.
Not at all.
Yeah.
But these are the kinds of conversations we need to be having. We have to shed light on these issues and understand what's at stake.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do here on this deep dive. We want to take these complicated issues and break them down so you can really understand what's going on and why it matters. Because knowledge is power, right? And an informed citizenry is the best defense we have against tyranny.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. People need to stay informed and engaged, especially during these times.
So before we move on, I want to leave you with something to consider. Something this whole situation makes me think about, and it's not something that was explicitly stated in the article.
Oh, okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
What's on your mind?
If this level of pressure and scrutiny is happening now, years after the events of January 6th, what does that tell us about what could happen in the future?
It's a really good point. If these investigations are being challenged and scrutinized so long after the fact, it definitely raises questions about, what could happen down the line if something similar were to happen again.
Do you think this could set a precedent for other administrations to try to interfere with investigations they don't like?
It's a possibility we can't ignore. I think it really underscores how important it is to stay vigilant and to protect the rule of law. We can't let law enforcement agencies be influenced by politics.
So it seems like this whole situation has some pretty big implications that go beyond just this one case.
Oh, absolutely. This brings up some fundamental questions about, the balance of power, the role of law enforcement in a democracy, and the protection of civil liberties. These are issues we really need to be talking about.
And it all comes back to that key point from the article. If the Justice Department actually takes action against these agents, what kind of message does that send?
Well, it could definitely have a chilling effect on future investigations. It could send the message that, looking into powerful people, even if there's a legitimate reason to do so, could put you at risk.
So this isn't just about these particular agents. It's about the potential impact on any future investigation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It could make whistleblowers think twice before coming forward. And it could make people hesitant to pursue those sensitive cases, because they're worried about retaliation. And that really undermines accountability.
We've talked about the FBI and the impact on trust in government, but what about the even bigger picture? What does this mean for democracy itself?
That's what it all boils down to, right? Democracies depend on these checks and balances. If one branch of government, especially the executive branch, can exert too much influence over law enforcement, it disrupts that whole balance of power. And that weakens the system as a whole.
It's like a domino effect. Yeah. One thing leads to another and the whole structure starts to crumble.
Exactly. And that's why these kinds of stories are so important for people to understand. This isn't just some political drama. This is about protecting the future of our democracy.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about today. It's a complicated and worrying situation, but I feel like I have a much better understanding of it now.
Glad to hear it. It's so important to stay informed and engaged on these issues. They affect all of us.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into this really important topic. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. And remember, knowledge is power, and informed citizenry is the foundation of a healthy democracy.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for having me.
Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive.